3 disturbing true school horror stories. Story 1. The Substitute. My name is Amber, and I was an 8th grade English teacher at Westview Middle School for 6 years. The school was pretty typical. A 1-story brick building from the 1970s with about 600 students in a quiet suburban area. Nothing about it seemed particularly unusual or threatening until what happened during my 5th year teaching there. It was late October, and I had to take a week off for a family emergency. The school arranged for a substitute teacher to cover my classes. A man named Mr. Reed. I'd never met him before, but the administration assured me he was experienced and came with excellent references. When I returned the following Monday, something felt off the moment I walked into my classroom. Nothing was visibly wrong. The desks were in order, my materials were where I'd left them, and the lesson plans I'd provided had been followed. But there was a heaviness in the air, a strange tension I couldn't explain. Then I noticed my students' behavior. They were unusually quiet that morning, lacking their normal energy. When I asked how things went with the substitute, they exchanged glances but said very little. "Fine," was the most common response, though without any enthusiasm. During my planning period, I went through the notes Mr. Reed had left me. His handwriting was neat but oddly small, almost microscopic in places, with certain words or phrases underlined multiple times for no apparent reason. His comments about the students were detailed, too detailed, noting things like which students blinked frequently, which ones touched their faces when they spoke, or how many times certain students asked to use the restroom. By lunchtime, one of my most outgoing students, Mia, came to see me. She seemed hesitant, standing in the doorway, as if unsure whether to enter. "Is everything okay, Mia?" I asked. She glanced down the hallway before stepping into the room. "I wanted to ask about Mr. Reed," she said quietly. "Is he coming back?" "No, he was just covering while I was gone." "Why do you ask?" Mia bit her lip. "He was weird, Ms. Thompson. He would just stare at us for long periods without saying anything, and he kept asking us personal questions." "What kind of personal questions?" I felt a chill run down my spine. "Like where we lived exactly, if our parents worked late, if we had alarm systems at our houses, stuff that didn't seem related to English class." I assured her I'd look into it and thanked her for telling me. Throughout the day, other students shared similar concerns. Several mentioned that Mr. Reed had asked them to write essays about their fears, or describe in detail what their bedrooms looked like. One student said Mr. Reed had offered to drive her home when she missed her bus, despite school policy strictly prohibiting teachers from transporting students in personal vehicles. That afternoon, I went to the principal's office to express my concerns. When I mentioned Mr. Reed's name, her expression changed immediately. "We've had some unusual feedback about him," she admitted. "I was going to speak with you about it." She pulled out a folder and showed me several parent emails complaining about inappropriate questions and comments Mr. Reed had made to their children. One parent reported that their son had seen Mr. Reed taking photos of students on his personal phone during lunch period. "We're not bringing him back," the principal assured me. "I've already contacted the substitute placement agency to report our concerns. They're conducting an investigation." I felt relieved but still troubled by what I was hearing. How did he get approved to teach here in the first place? The principal looked uncomfortable. That's the strange thing. His background check was clean, and he had glowing recommendations from 3 other schools in neighboring districts. I called one of them this morning, and they had no record of him ever working there. The reference contact doesn't exist. I left her office feeling deeply unsettled. That night, I decided to do some searching online to see if I could find any information about Mr. Reed. After an hour of looking, I found a local news article from 2 years earlier about a man arrested for stalking several middle school students in a town about 100 miles away. The article included a blurry courtroom photo, and though I couldn't be completely certain, the man looked remarkably similar to Mr. Reed. The next day, the principal informed the staff that the substitute agency had no record of actually placing Mr. Reed at our school. Someone had somehow intercepted their communications and falsified credentials. The police were now involved. 2 days later, a detective came to interview me and several students. They showed me a photo lineup, and I immediately identified Mr. Reed. The detective's face grew serious. "This man's real name is Edward Mercer," he explained. "He's been investigated multiple times for inappropriate behavior around minors, though he's never been formally charged due to lack of evidence. He's not a registered teacher in any state." What they told me next made my skin crawl. When they searched Mercer's apartment, they found detailed notes about 27 students from our school, their schedules, home addresses, and routines. They found crude maps of house layouts, including some that matched the floor plans students had described in their essays about their bedrooms. Most disturbing of all, they found a calendar with several student names circled, including Mia's, with dates listed beside them. The date next to Mia's name was only 2 weeks away. The police never publicly disclosed exactly what they believed Mercer was planning, but based on the other items found in his apartment, zip ties, duct tape, and a collection of small souvenir items apparently taken from various schools, their conclusions were grim. Mercer himself had disappeared. Despite an intensive search, he wasn't located until 3 months later, when he was arrested while working as a janitor at an elementary school in another state, using yet another false identity. The school implemented much stricter verification procedures for substitutes after that, requiring in-person interviews and multiple identity confirmations before allowing anyone into a classroom. We also began locking classroom doors during instruction and installed additional security cameras throughout the building. But the damage was already done. Many students required counseling, and several transferred to different schools. As for me, I still feel a chill every time I have to take a day off and leave my students with a substitute. I check and double-check the substitute's credentials, and I always tell my students to report anything that makes them uncomfortable. Sometimes I still think about those detailed notes, the way he meticulously documented my students' habits and homes during that single week. I wonder how many other schools he infiltrated before being caught, how many other classrooms full of students he observed and studied, and I wonder if there are others like him out there, using schools as hunting grounds, hiding behind forged credentials and fake smiles. Story 2. The Basement Corridor. I'm Kevin, and I worked as a maintenance technician at Oak Ridge High School for almost a decade. Oak Ridge was an older school, built in the 1950s with additions constructed in the 70s and 90s, creating a sprawling campus with a somewhat confusing layout. The original building had 3 floors, plus a basement level that housed the boiler room, storage areas, and some rarely used classrooms for specialized classes like ceramics and photography. As part of the maintenance staff, I had access to every part of the building, including areas that were off limits to students. Most of my work involved fixing classroom equipment, handling minor plumbing issues, and maintaining the heating and cooling systems. I typically worked the day shift, but occasionally I'd take evening shifts when special events were happening, or when we needed to do repairs that would disrupt classes if done during the day. The basement level was always the least pleasant part of the building to work in, dimly lit, with low ceilings and a persistent musty smell that no amount of cleaning could eliminate. The corridor that ran beneath the original building was particularly unpleasant, with pipes running along the ceiling, concrete walls painted an institutional green, and floors that always seemed slightly damp, regardless of the weather. Students called it the dungeon corridor and generally avoided it except when necessary to reach the ceramics or photography rooms. Even teachers seemed to dislike it, often taking longer routes through the building to avoid passing through the basement. I never gave it much thought until my 7th year at Oak Ridge, when a series of strange maintenance issues began occurring in the basement. It started with lights that would burn out within days of being replaced. At first, I assumed it was just faulty bulbs or wiring issues, but even after we replaced entire fixtures, the problem persisted specifically in one section of the corridor. Then came the temperature fluctuations. The basement was typically cooler than the rest of the building due to being partially underground, but certain areas began experiencing extreme cold spots, dropping 15 to 20 degrees compared to areas just a few feet away. Our HVAC specialist couldn't find any explanation for these localized temperature changes. Around the same time, students began complaining about feeling uncomfortable in the basement corridor. Some reported feeling like they were being watched or followed when walking through it alone. A few even claimed to have heard whispers or seen movement in their peripheral vision. These stories were dismissed as typical high school rumors, fueled by the creepy atmosphere of the basement. But then the graffiti started appearing. Every few days, we'd find new markings on the walls of the basement corridor. Not typical teenage graffiti with names or crude drawings, but strange symbols that resembled ancient runes or sigils. They would appear overnight in places that should have been securely locked, with no signs of forced entry. We'd paint over them, only to find new ones the next day, often in exactly the same spots. The principal asked us to install additional security cameras in the basement, hoping to catch whoever was vandalizing the walls. The cameras worked fine during the day, but would inexplicably malfunction between approximately 2 and 4 a.m., showing only static or going completely dark during those hours. Things escalated when students began reporting a foul odor in certain sections of the corridor, like rotting meat or decay. As the maintenance technician responsible for the area, I investigated thoroughly, but could find no source for the smell. We checked for dead animals in the walls, mold growth, sewer gas leaks, nothing. The odor would appear suddenly, become overwhelming for a day or two, then vanish completely, only to reappear in a different section of the corridor weeks later. One evening in late October, I was working a rare night shift to repair some electrical issues in the science labs. Around 10 p.m., I needed to go to the basement to retrieve some tools from the maintenance room. As I descended the stairs, I immediately noticed that the corridor was significantly colder than usual, cold enough that I could see my breath in the air. The fluorescent lights were flickering irregularly, creating a disorienting strobe effect. As I walked down the corridor, I felt an increasing sense of unease, like I was being observed from multiple directions. The sound of my footsteps seemed to echo strangely, as if the acoustics of the space had somehow changed. About halfway down the corridor, I heard what sounded like whispers coming from around the next corner. Thinking that perhaps students had snuck into the building, I called out, "Hello? This area is closed. You need to leave immediately." The whispers stopped abruptly. I turned the corner and found the corridor empty, but on the wall was a fresh symbol, one I hadn't seen before, larger and more complex than the previous markings. The paint or ink was still wet, glistening under the flickering lights. As I stared at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, I heard a sound behind me, a soft shuffling, like someone dragging their feet. I turned quickly, but again, the corridor was empty. When I looked back at the wall, the symbol was gone. No trace of it remained, not even a smudge on the painted concrete. I retrieved my tools as quickly as possible and left the basement, thoroughly unnerved by the experience. I didn't report it immediately, worried about sounding paranoid or superstitious. But the next day, I decided to research the history of the school, curious if there was any explanation for the strange occurrences in the basement. What I discovered disturbed me deeply. The land where Oak Ridge High School now stood had previously been the site of a small psychiatric hospital that operated from the 1910s to the 1940s. The hospital had been demolished to make way for the school, but according to local historical records, the basement level of the school incorporated parts of the original hospital's underground infrastructure, including a corridor that had connected the main building to a now demolished outbuilding used for difficult patients. Further research revealed disturbing accounts of the hospital's practices. Patients were subjected to experimental treatments, including early versions of electroshock therapy, ice water immersion, and other now discredited methods. Several patients had reportedly died during these treatments, and rumors of staff abusing patients were common. Most concerning was a newspaper article from 1943 describing an incident where a patient and an orderly both disappeared, after last being seen entering the underground corridor connecting the buildings. Despite an extensive search, they were never found. The hospital closed a few years later, and the buildings were eventually demolished. Armed with this knowledge, I approached the school principal and shared my concerns that the strange occurrences might be connected to the building's history. To my surprise, she admitted that others had raised similar concerns over the years. The basement corridor had always been a source of unusual incidents, dating back to when the school first opened. She agreed to bring in a contractor to inspect the basement thoroughly, looking for any structural or environmental issues that might explain the phenomena we were experiencing. The inspection revealed something unexpected. Behind one section of the basement wall was a sealed doorway that didn't appear on any of the building's blueprints. It had been covered over during the school's construction, but not properly sealed, which possibly explained some of the odd temperature and odor issues. The school board approved an emergency renovation project to properly seal the doorway and improve the basement's lighting and ventilation. During this work, the construction crew discovered a small space behind the sealed door that contained several artifacts from the old hospital: restraints, outdated medical equipment, and a logbook with patient records. Most disturbing was a collection of small personal items that appeared to have belonged to patients: rings, watches, and lockets, carefully arranged in a peculiar pattern on a metal shelf. The items were removed and turned over to a local historical society, and the space was properly sealed with concrete. After the renovation, many of the strange phenomena decreased significantly. The lights stopped burning out, the temperature stabilized, and the mysterious odors disappeared entirely. But the feelings of unease in the corridor persisted. Students still reported being watched, and occasionally whispers would be heard when no one was present. The school eventually decided to discontinue using the basement classrooms entirely, converting spaces on the upper floors for the ceramics and photography classes. The basement corridor was restricted to maintenance personnel only, with student access prohibited. I continued working at Oak Ridge for another 2 years after these events. During that time, I only entered the basement corridor when absolutely necessary, and never alone if I could help it. Even with the improved lighting and ventilation, there was something fundamentally wrong about that space, something that no amount of renovation could fix. On my last day before taking a position at another school, I had to make one final check of the boiler system in the basement. As I was leaving, I heard a clear whisper right next to my ear. "You're the last to know our secret." I turned, but as always, there was no one there. Just the empty corridor and the persistent feeling that something was watching me from behind the walls. I don't know if Oak Ridge High School is haunted in the traditional sense, or if something more complex is happening there. Some kind of psychic imprint left by the suffering that occurred on that land decades ago. What I do know is that buildings remember, and sometimes the worst memories lie in the spaces we try hardest to forget. Story 3. The Locker Room. My name is Tasha, and what happened to me took place during my sophomore year at Lakeside High School. I was 15, a member of the girls' swim team, and generally an average student who tried to stay out of drama and keep to a close circle of friends. Lakeside was a fairly large public high school with about 2,000 students. It wasn't particularly old or creepy, just your standard building from the early 90s with beige walls, fluorescent lighting, and the usual assortment of classrooms, labs, and athletic facilities. The pool area was in the athletic wing, separate from the main academic building. It included the pool itself, a small set of bleachers for spectators, and locker rooms for the swim teams. The girls' locker room was pretty basic. Rows of lockers, bathroom stalls, shower area, and a coach's office off to one side. Nothing unusual about it. I'd been on the swim team since freshman year and had spent countless hours in that locker room without incident. Practice was Monday through Thursday after school, with swim meets on some Fridays or Saturdays. We typically had the pool to ourselves, though occasionally we would share it with the boys' team if they had schedule conflicts. The first strange thing happened in early November. I was running late for practice and found myself alone in the locker room, everyone else already at the pool. As I was changing, I heard what sounded like someone whispering from the shower area. I assumed it was another late teammate, but when I called out, there was no response. I walked over to the showers, but they were empty. All the stalls vacant, no sign anyone had been there recently. I figured I had just imagined it, or maybe heard water in the pipes and thought nothing more of it. A week later, several of us were in the locker room after practice when the lights suddenly went out. Total darkness for about 10 seconds, then they flickered back on. We laughed it off as faulty wiring, but one girl, Megan, said she felt someone touch her shoulder when the lights were out, even though no one had been standing near her. These minor incidents continued. Whispers when the room should have been empty, lights flickering, occasional missing items that would later reappear in strange places. Most of the team brushed it off as pranks or coincidences, but a sense of unease gradually built among us. Then Allison, our team captain, had a more disturbing experience. She was the last to leave one evening and was alone in the locker room. While she was at her locker, she heard one of the shower faucets turn on. She went to check, thinking someone might have left it running, and found a single shower going full blast, steam filling the area. As she turned it off, she distinctly heard someone laugh directly behind her. She whirled around, but no one was there. The door to the locker room was still closed, and there was nowhere anyone could have hidden in the open shower area. Allison told us about it the next day, visibly shaken. Our coach overheard and seemed concerned but dismissed it as imagination or a prank by the boys' team. She promised to talk to their coach about respecting boundaries. But things only escalated. Girls began reporting that they felt like they were being watched while changing or showering. Some claimed to have seen a shadowy figure in the mirror that disappeared when they turned around. One girl found her street clothes soaking wet when she returned from practice, even though they had been securely in her locker. The atmosphere in the locker room changed. What had once been a place for casual conversation and team bonding became tense and uncomfortable. We started changing quickly, avoiding the showers if possible, and no one wanted to be the first to arrive or the last to leave. Some girls even quit the team citing various excuses, but privately admitting they were freaked out by what was happening. Our coach finally took the complaints seriously when she witnessed something herself. She had been in her office during practice, catching up on paperwork. The office had a window that looked out into the main locker room area. She heard what sounded like locker doors slamming repeatedly, even though the room should have been empty. When she went to investigate, all the locker doors were opening and closing on their own, slowly at first, then building to a crescendo of metallic banging that was so loud she had to cover her ears. It stopped abruptly when she yelled for it to stop. After that incident, the school administration got involved. They brought in maintenance workers to check for issues with the ventilation system, electrical wiring, or plumbing that might explain the strange occurrences. Nothing conclusive was found, though they did note that the locker room temperature was consistently colder than other areas of the building, even with the heating system running at full capacity. Some teachers and staff began sharing stories they'd heard over the years, rumors that the girls' locker room had always been a site of unexplained phenomena. Apparently, these incidents dated back to the school's opening, though they seemed to occur in cycles, becoming intense for a period before subsiding for years at a time. The administration, concerned about the growing anxiety among the swim team and worried about potential liability issues, decided to temporarily relocate us to the PE locker room while they did a more extensive renovation of the swim locker room. They cited air quality concerns as the official reason, not wanting to acknowledge the possibility of anything supernatural. For a few weeks, things were normal again. No strange noises, no missing items, no flickering lights. We began to think that whatever had been happening was indeed just some issue with the building itself, now being addressed by the renovations. Then came the incident that still haunts me today. It was a Friday afternoon, and we had an important meet the next day. I had forgotten my competition swimsuit in my regular locker and needed it for the meet. Most of the team had already left, but Coach Jensen gave me the key to the swim locker room and told me to be quick since the renovation crew had already gone home for the weekend. I went alone to the swim locker room, which was partially torn up from the renovation work. Plastic sheets covered some areas, and construction equipment was scattered around, but the lockers were still accessible. The room was dimly lit, with only emergency lights functioning due to the ongoing electrical work. As soon as I entered, I felt the temperature drop dramatically. My breath came out in visible puffs, even though it was early spring and not particularly cold outside. I hurried to my locker, trying to ignore the prickling sensation on the back of my neck that made me feel like I was being watched. I had just opened my locker when I heard a girl crying. It was coming from the shower area, a soft, muffled sobbing that sounded so genuinely distressed that my first instinct was concern rather than fear. "Hello," I called out. "Is someone there? Are you okay?" The crying stopped immediately. Then, after a moment, I heard a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "She hurt me. She hurt me, and no one believed me." I stood frozen, my heart pounding. Who are you?" I managed to ask. Instead of an answer, all the shower faucets turned on simultaneously with a deafening screech of metal and rushing water. Steam began to fill the room with unnatural speed, reducing visibility to almost nothing within seconds. Through the thickening mist, I saw a figure standing by the showers, a girl about my age in what looked like an outdated swimsuit, her hair plastered to her face and water dripping from her body. But there was something wrong with the way she looked, something distorted about her proportions and movements as she began walking toward me. I backed away, fumbling for the door behind me without taking my eyes off the approaching figure. As she got closer, I could see bruises on her arms and neck, and her eyes. Her eyes were completely black, no whites or irises visible. She said no one would believe me, the figure said, her voice now sounding garbled, as if speaking underwater. She said I was crazy. She held me down until I couldn't breathe anymore. The figure was now close enough that I could feel a bone-deep cold radiating from her. Water was pooling on the floor beneath her, but I realized with horror that it wasn't clear like shower water. It was darkly tinted, almost black in the dim light. I finally found the door handle and yanked it open, backing into the hallway. The figure stopped at the threshold, unable or unwilling to cross it. For a moment, we stared at each other, and I saw such profound sadness and rage in those black eyes that I felt a wave of pity despite my terror. "Who hurt you?" I heard myself ask, though my mind was screaming at me to run. "Coach," the figure whispered, the word barely audible. "Not your coach, the one before, the one they all protected." Then the door slammed shut between us with such force that the frame cracked. I ran all the way to the main office, hysterical and soaking wet, though I had never been under the showers. The aftermath was chaotic. School officials initially thought I was pranking them or had some kind of breakdown. But when they went to investigate, they found the locker room flooded, all showers running at full blast, and the water stained a rusty color that tests later showed was actually decades-old iron deposits suddenly dislodged from the pipes. More disturbing was what the renovation crew found the following Monday when they removed the original wall tiles in the shower area. Behind the tiles was a message scratched into the concrete. "Stephanie Kaufman, 1993. She drowned me here." A subsequent search of school records showed that a student named Stephanie Kaufman had indeed attended Lakeside in the early 90s and had been on the swim team. According to official records, she had transferred to another school mid-year, but deeper investigation uncovered a disturbing truth. There was no record of her ever enrolling at another school. Former students from that era were interviewed, and a disturbing picture emerged. The swim coach at that time, a woman named Marianne Turner, had been known for her harsh training methods and volatile temper. Several former swimmers reported being physically and emotionally abused by her, but their complaints had been ignored or dismissed by the administration, who valued the team's winning record more than student welfare. Multiple students recalled Stephanie as a talented swimmer who had repeatedly clashed with Coach Turner. They remembered her suddenly disappearing mid-year, with the official explanation being a family move, but no one had actually seen her after a particularly intense argument with the coach that had been overheard by several team members. The police launched an investigation reopening what had never actually been a case in the first place. Ground-penetrating radar was used to examine the foundations beneath the locker room, but nothing conclusive was found. Coach Turner, long since retired and living in another state, died of a heart attack 2 days after police contacted her for questioning. The school closed the pool facility for the remainder of that year. When it reopened, the entire locker room had been demolished and rebuilt in a different configuration. A memorial plaque for Stephanie Kaufman was placed in the new facility, acknowledging the school's failure to protect her and promising that such institutional neglect would never happen again. As for me, I never returned to the swim team. I couldn't bring myself to enter that building again, even after the renovation. Sometimes I still dream about the girl in the shower, her black eyes, and the profound sadness in them. In the dreams, she's always trying to tell me something else, something I can't quite hear, no matter how hard I try to listen. I don't know if what I encountered was Stephanie's ghost or something else entirely. Perhaps the physical space itself somehow preserved the emotional trauma of what had happened there. All I know is that sometimes the worst hauntings aren't caused by the dead, but by the living who failed them. And the truth, no matter how deeply buried, eventually finds a way to surface.